Good Friday afternoon. This is the grand finale of the Bulldog World Order. Uncle Lou will be joining us shortly. Take it away, Magnum.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Yeah, Uncle Lou's running a little bit late. He had to pick up his kids from school, but he's on the way back to the house, so he'll be joining us shortly. And like Ray said, this is the last episode of the Bulldog World Order for this season. Later on in the year, if some breaking news comes up and it's worthy of a show, then we'll schedule a special show about, whatever or whatever. But other than that, this is the last weekly show for the season. So I'll conclude it by starting off talking about some of the news that the University of Georgia's had. We got Rob Sell to replace Will Friend as our offensive line coach. I like the hire, and, with us returning 4 out of 5 starters on the offensive line, he's got, a lot of returning talent to work with. Yeah, we're not going to really drop off on the offensive line. And the way, if you follow the University of Georgia, you know that the way we, rotate players in and out, there's players constantly getting meaningful game time experience on the offensive line. So whoever comes in, they're going to have game experience already, so it's not like they're going to be fresh and, thrown to the wolves. So it's kind of like Patrick Ramsey. Everybody, every UGA fan expects Patrick Ramsey to be the guy next year, and he's got some game time experience. So he's not going to be thrown to the wolves, I guess you'd say, because he's actually got some meaningful game time experience. But I like the hire, and I think between Rick Schartenheimer, Rob Sell, I don't think we're going to really drop off much. We've got so many guys coming back. Every running back minus Todd Gurley, of course. And if you ask me, I know me and Uncle Lou, we talked about this in the past. Mason, he wasn't terrible, but he just didn't really have the arm to, make our passing game effective. So, in my personal opinion, I think we upgraded the quarterback position. Ramsey's got a better arm, and he's a little more mobile than Hudson Mason. So I think that position is an upgrade. Of course, Nick Chubb, Sonny Michel, hopefully Keith Marshall can stay healthy this year. That's been an issue for him the last couple of years. Of course, Brenda Douglas coming in. So, he's been there. But, we got all these running backs, coming back. So we've got a lot of experience in the backfield. Of course, fullback, Quavon Hicks, what me and Uncle Lou refer to as the dump truck. He's back. We returned 4 receivers: Malcolm Mitchell, Justin Scott Wesley, Isaiah McKenzie, Reggie David. I know Towns, he got slight time last year, but he wasn't really a main factor at the receiving position. But I guess you say 5 since he's there. But we're loaded on offense. We're not really going to drop off. Our running game is just going to, be just as good. Our passing game is going to improve with Ramsey. So offensively, I don't think we're going to have any issues whatsoever. Defensively, the only really question I have defensively is who is going to replace Damian Swan. I think Damian Swan had his best year as a dog this past year. Of course, he's, graduating, so he's gone. And he was the closest thing we've had to a shutdown corner since Champ Bailey, and, he played lights out most of the year. That's my only question on defense. Of course, Leonard Floyd's coming back, Jordan Jenkins, Lorenzo Carter, and one guy that we spent a little bit of time on, but not a whole lot of time, Dominic Sanders. This guy, I think he's a future All-American. Against Louisville, he had 2 interceptions, almost had 3 picks. He's definitely a rising star, and he may be the guy that can fill in for Damian Swan. That has yet to be seen, but that guy definitely has potential. And with the addition of, depending on what site you look at, but I think most sites have him listed as the number 1 player in the country, Trent Thompson. He's going to add help on the defensive line. Jonathan Ledbetter, who was once committed to the University of Alabama, who's now committed to the University of Georgia. He's definitely going to help. Rashad Roundtree, depending on what website you looked at, he was rated in between the number 3 and number 5 safety. So it's really safe to say that, Jeremy Pruitt has been hitting a recruiting trail. And, Georgia fans knew once we got him, that was going to help recruiting a lot defensively. just in the short time Pruitt's been there, he's already done, in my opinion, he's done a much better job recruiting than Todd Grantham, ever did. So I expect us to actually be improved on defense. Now, I've talked about this with several people, and Georgia was ranked number 1 as far as pass defense goes in the SEC last year. So, in my personal opinion, pass defense is, they'll be okay. But the run defense is really what needs to improve. And like I said, hopefully with the addition of Thompson and Ledbetter, that they can help out with that. And with a lot of the guys we got coming back, I think that we should be improved in the run defense. But all these are the what if game is being played right now, so we just got to wait and see what happens really. I know right now everybody's just talking about who's the front runners of the East and who's the front runners of the West, all that good stuff right now. But this being the South, football is 365 days here. I mean, football, the old saying, football is religion in the South, and I mean that's pretty close to accurate. So I mean, it's like every day I have a conversation with somebody from a different fan base talking about who's going to beat who's going to win what. But it gives us something to talk about. Football's over, so it gives us something to talk about. And really, the only football left is the NFL. You've got the championship, the conference championship games, and then the Super Bowl. And I know, Ray, you wish the Jags were there, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Well, thank you for taking a shot at me, but man, yeah.
I know. I had to, since Uncle Lou's not here, I got to take a shot at somebody. I got to involve somebody else. But hey, me being a Falcons fan, I can't really say a whole lot because we didn't make the playoffs, either. But it is what it is.
Man,
gotta have some fun.
Until we get a new head coach, we're pretty much sitting ducks. I mean, the only thing that our GM could do possibly if he picked up in a surprise move if he grabbed Marcus, because I mean you had Bortles that learned from Henny, which is garbage to begin with. So he's pretty much done. You can get a new offensive coordinator, but it's really not going to matter if you can't score anyway. So
well, let me ask you this. If you had, let's say you were the GM and the ball was in your court, who would you pick if both of these players were available when it came time for the Jaguars to pick? Who would you rather have? Would you take Marcus Mariota or would you take Todd Gurley?
But you know what? In the old NFL, I'd take Todd Gurley. I apologize. But with his injury, he's probably going to drop to the second round anyway. Now if you throw him on the same time as Bortles, I may just go Marcus because he knows how to do more with less.
Well, I know the knock on Marcus has been, is he the, NFL, prototypical NFL quarterback? And a lot of people, and I myself included, I don't think he is, but I think with his, especially with the NFL nowadays, I think his mobility and, his ability to escape the pressure in the pocket and, create extra time with his legs, he stands a chance to, succeed. I mean, right now whether he will or not, but I think he has potential.
I mean, this is what I don't – I know this is the Georgia show, but I'm just going to speak really quick on the Jags. Here's what I don't understand. You draft a tackle, you got another bookend tackle, you got two bookend tackles. You got, you could have went for a cheaper center. And they did none of them. They got rid of their great to elite tackle, for the other guy that got injured. And then they go after Mack, knowing that there was no way they was able to do that. I mean, it made absolute no sense. And now our line is terrible. We got no running game, and our wide receivers are just young. So,
well, it's safe to say that the Jags need help, everywhere, and I don't know, man. I mean, to me, the Jaguars seem a lot like the Raiders in a way, where they seem to draft some talent, and then they seem to get some good players, but then they turn around and either the players don't succeed with the organization or they trade away what they do have and then they fall off the map. I mean, to me, the two are similar in that aspect. I think that if the Jaguars could actually just keep some players around and help develop them, of course, I think some of that front office needs to change. But, I mean, if some of that were to happen, I mean, who knows?
Well, I mean, but here's just the only problem I have is you have historically the worst coach in the NFL. Historically, there's no denying that. You could say, well, the team's young or whatever, but I remember a Carolina Panthers team that had a bunch of nobodies and made the playoffs. So that's not an excuse, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, coaching does play a huge factor. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and deny that. But at the end of the day, I think probably the best coach that Jacksonville has ever had was Jack Del Rio. I mean, he's up to the playoffs multiple times. He almost made it to the damn Super Bowl one year.
No. Actually, the best one we had was Tom Coughlin, but I'm not going to argue there. But I mean, imagine Georgia. Okay, this is what I got to deal with. Their coaching is they don't have principles down. They can't in the backfield they can't tackle. They can't run. They can't pass. They don't run routes right. I mean, you can go on and on. If Georgia does not have basic fundamentals down, they're not winning too many games, and that's what's going on with Jacksonville.
Yeah, and see, I know a lot of people knocked Mike Bobo for his situational play calling. Hell, I did too. I'm not going to lie. But, at the end of the day, Georgia, they did, produce a lot of wins under Mike Bobo. They led the SEC in scoring offense this year, and for the past several years, we've been near the top. I mean, we've had the coaches, of course, the SEC championship has eluded us for 10 years, but, we still had the coaches that would help develop the players to the point where at least they can compete, and that's been what I've been saying for years. And this year proved it as well. Georgia went 2-0 against the SEC West, and yes, we lost to Alabama in the 2012 SEC championship game, but we competed with them. I mean, in no way, shape, form, or fashion did they blow us out, kick our ass, or whatever. Georgia can compete with any team on any given Saturday. That's where I stand on that, and I think with the addition of Schottenheimer and Rob Sell, I think these could be the coaches to get us to that next level, but that has, yet to be seen.
Yeah, and I mean, coaching, plays a huge, role both in college and the NFL. But, I mean, it's ridiculous. If Georgia was I don't care if they got new coaches or whatever, okay? If they went 2 years in a row and they can't hit 500, and the last 7 of 8 years or 8 of 9, they can't go 500, there's a problem. There is a serious problem. There has to be a change. Yeah,
well, thank goodness we haven't had that problem, and that's one thing I've gone back and forth with Tennessee fans is a lot of those fans, they're still living in the 90s. They still think they're relevant, and they call us choke artists and all that stuff. But, I mean, when you sit down and look at it, when's the last time Georgia's had 4 consecutive losing seasons? He just finished with one game above 500 this season. So, I mean, when you've got other teams trying to talk trash to a team that is clearly better than them right now, I've got a problem with that. I mean, one thing about Georgia is it's safe to say that Georgia's probably going to get 10 wins a year with Mark Richt. I mean, some programs would kill to have that consistency. Wouldn't you agree?
I do. I think, this is out of my realm and everything. But, after what happened with, TCU this year and everything, I think personally they should take the top four teams in each conference and have them play each other and then do the playoff system. I know that sounds crazy, but I think you'd really know who was the national champion then.
Well, one thing I've been saying is, and I think the playoff will expand to 8 teams, but if nothing else, I think college football would be better suited with a 16 playoff, like a NFL-style playoff. You've got 6 teams. You've got the number 1 and number 2 seeds that get a bye, and then the other teams would be, like the wild card. I think if it's set up similar, like that, along par with the NFL, I think the playoff system would actually be better, and I think that you could probably say without a doubt, with 6 teams, you could say without a doubt, okay, this team is the national champion, because usually it's the top 6 teams that have an argument that say, oh, we deserve to be there. Well, you throw in the 6 teams, well, you got a chance to prove it. It's like this year, a lot of people thought Ohio State didn't belong. Well, they got their chance to prove that they did belong, and, well, by God, they sure as hell did prove it,
Well, I mean, can't they, because it is college and it's not NFL, can't they just go a different route to try to separate themselves and, kind of like NCAA basketball does with some sort of tournament?
Well, I mean, that's kind of what it was this year. It's just 4 teams. I mean, in no way do I think that 64, 66 teams, college football should be in the fucking tournament. But, like I said, at most 8 teams. And I think eventually the playoff will expand to 8 teams, and that's pretty much exactly like a NCAA basketball tournament. If you have 8 teams, you won't have one team to get that bye. I mean, if you had 6 teams, you would have to do that, just like the NFL. But 8 teams, it would be like a tournament setup.
Yeah, but could they take, like a team from like let's say the SEC West and, the champion from there and then the champion from the SEC East and, the champion from the different, conferences, or would that just be too confusing?
Yeah, I mean, at most, I definitely think, the Power 5, okay, the champions from the Power 5 conferences should be there. All right, and then if you had 8 teams, then you would have, okay, the next 3 teams would be like, I guess, the best maybe the best second-place team in a couple conferences, or you just take the remaining 3 teams who are the best in college football and put them in there. I really don't see it being a team like from the SEC East and from the SEC West. I don't really see that.
Do you think they eventually could make it a spectacle where they could take the champions from the year before and automatically put them in there as a you got to beat the team?
Depending on how they do. I mean that kind of happened this year. Florida State was nowhere near the team they were last year, but since they ran the table, they went undefeated. They pretty much had no choice but to put them in there. I mean, they're the defending national champions. They went undefeated, and everybody knew. I mean, people that can go back and listen to the archive of this show. Me and Uncle Lou, predicted, double-digit win for Oregon over Florida State. But just because they were the defending national champions and ran the table, they got put in. So that's already happened. So, I mean, it could happen again. Let's say Ohio State next year. Let's say they win every game by 1 or 2 points, and that includes playing the scrubs that they play. They're going to be put in there because they're the defending national champion. They're the conference champion. You can't leave them out.
But I do agree with the whole 8. Probably 8 scenario would probably work the best. You really can't do 6 because there's just be an odd number of teams.
Well, I mean, like I said, the only way 6 teams would work is if they do it NFL style, playoffs. That's the only way 6 would work. But like I said, at the end of the day, I think that it will be expanded to 8 teams, and I do think that probably would work better than 6. But 6 is better than 4. I would be for a 16 playoff quicker than I would be a 4.
All right. Well, we're still waiting for Uncle Lou. I'm going to throw you, for a loop because you're very, knowledgeable when it comes to college sports. Being the way that TCU played, I think they're the only team that feel that they got snubbed. The way that they played, do you think they would have stood a chance against any of the playoff teams?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question in my mind. I think they would have competed, but I'm probably one of the odd ones out. I mean, I know a lot of people think this, but me personally, if there was one team that got screwed, it was Baylor, because Baylor won the head-to-head meeting against TCU. And that's what kind of confused me all year long was TCU was ranked ahead of Baylor for so many weeks, and that left me scratching my head because Baylor won the head-to-head meeting against TCU. So, I mean, there's no question in my mind TCU could have competed. I'm not even going to lie about that. But at the same time, I think Baylor could have as well. And I think that they deserve to be there more so than TCU simply because if both teams had one loss, which they did, you got, in my personal opinion, you got to go with the tiebreaker, the head-to-head matchup. Who won? Baylor did. I mean, that's where I stand.
And they probably would have made a lot of money if they, added in, a rematch for that as well.
Probably so. Who knows what would have happened? But at the same time, for that to have happened, you would have had to throw two Big 12 teams in the 14 playoff, and that just wasn't going to happen. And either we got a caller or that's Uncle Lou. Which one?
Good morning.
That's not Uncle Lou.
Yeah, that's not Uncle Lou. Who's that?
Lou Jr.
Oh, that is Uncle Lou.
It
Okay.
is. You sneaky devil.
Lou Jr. called in. Just to say hey there.
Yeah, at first I didn't know who that was, so.
Okay. I'm going to ask one more question. I'm going to ask you both. Had Marcus had everybody healthy, would have Ohio State stood a chance based on the way they played?
Okay. Are you talking about Ohio State? You're talking about the Ohio State-Oregon game, right?
Correct. If Marcus had all his weapons back.
Okay. Well, yeah. Oregon was out. I forget his name, but he was their main receiver, and they were. Let's see, what was his name? I forget. Damn it! But they were without their number one defensive back as well. So they were missing some key pieces. But just the way Oregon struggled offensively, I can't say one player on offense would have made the difference because Oregon all year round was putting up points left and right. They had one of the best offenses in the country. And, you look at the past several years. When Oregon's played a team that's, physical, that will stand up and punch them in the mouth, they struggle. And that's exactly what happened in that game. Ohio State was just more physical, and their defense came to play. And Oregon has struggled with that in the past. So I can't say Oregon would have won if they would have had that, the receiver on offense or even that defensive back on defense. I mean, they were dominated to the point where you can't ignore that. I just think at the end of the day, Ohio State still would have won that.
Yeah, I agree. I watched the whole game, and I was surprised obviously because I picked Oregon to win. But after watching the game, I don't think one or two players, whatever the wide receivers, those wide receivers weren't going to tackle Ezekiel Elliott, and no one else was going to tackle him either. So I don't think it would have made a difference.
Yeah,
the score may have been a little closer, but I don't think it would have affected the outcome of the game.
Yeah, because the defensive back they were missing, he sure as hell wasn't going to make a difference stopping Ezekiel Elliott. So even with him, Elliott still would have had the 240-something yards rushing that he did. So
think about it. Florida State fans, Sheltered Hell or whatever his name is in particular, bitched and moaned that the only reason the game was so lopsided is because Florida State had those turnovers. Well, Ohio State also had 4 turnovers. And imagine if Ohio State wouldn't have had those 4 turnovers. They would have beat Oregon like Oregon beat Florida State. So really, it wasn't even as close as the score looked. It really was a lot worse of a beating than that. Ohio State left, those 4 turnovers, let's say they score 2. That's at least 14 points they left out there. It was they just dominated them.
Yeah, I agree. To me, Oregon was outclassed. Ohio State punched them in the mouth, and it just seemed like Ohio State wanted it more. That's what I got from that game. And as good as Marcus Mariota was, I mean, he just has problems facing a physical defense, and that's just the way it's been.
And not just Marcus Mariota. I mean, this has been a recurring theme for Oregon now going back 5 or 6 years. That's why I was predicting that Oregon was going to blow out Florida State, but I really was just predicting that because I hate Florida State. Like, I really didn't expect that to happen just because Oregon has that track record where they average 60 points a game against Arizona and Washington State and Cal and, you know, all these teams. Then they show up and play Auburn. They score 21. You know, they just have this history where, you know, in big games of scoring about 40 points below their average. And if you look at the Ohio State game, that's exactly what happened. So it was a little bit surprising because of the whooping they put on Florida State. But overall, that's pretty much the Oregon team we've seen for the last 6, 7, 8 years. 60 points a game in conference play, 24 points in a BCS game or a game that matters.
Yeah, and you know, and with Marcus Mariota departing, I don't really know who they got coming in at quarterback, but I think it's safe to say that reoccurring theme is probably going to continue. Until, in my personal opinion, until Oregon starts getting these guys that can be physical on defense, they're just not going to win one. I just don't see how, you know, you can just go. I mean, it seems like the Oregon Ducks are the Raiders of college football. They go with speed and almost nothing else. That's what I get.
Yeah, even Oregon fans. Now, I think a lot of them thought it was going to be different this year, but Oregon fans, even in the past, have readily admitted that it's the offensive and defensive lines where they struggle. And when they lost to Arizona earlier in the year this year, that was their excuse. They had one lineman hurt. That's why they gave up 60 points and got beat by Arizona, because they had one offensive lineman out. So they've been getting pushed around on the offensive and defensive lines for years, but they've had the speed and the talent to outscore people in the Pac-12. But again, I'll go back to the national championship game when they played Auburn, who didn't, and Auburn had a decent defense, but they didn't even have the best defense in the SEC that year. You know, they had a great team. Obviously, they won the national title, but they didn't even have the best defense. You know, they didn't have the best defense. You know, that was Cam Newton year. But, you know, they struggled to get to 20 points against Auburn that year. I believe it was the very next season they opened up against LSU in Dallas, and same thing. They scored 20, I think it was 21, 23 points, something like that. And then the rest of the year they scored 60 points a game against the Pac-12. And it's because they get dominated up front at the line of scrimmage. And if you watch the Ohio State game, that's what happened. Ohio State was in the backfield on every play. Ezekiel Elliott had holes you could drive a semi-truck through. And I'm not taking anything away from that Ezekiel Elliott. He's a hell of a running back. I mean, what he did the last 3 games of the year is unbelievable. I mean, he had 700 and something yards rushing between the Big Ten championship game, the playoff game, and the title game. I mean, you know, you can say what you want about Wisconsin or even Alabama or even Oregon's defense, but to run for 700 and something yards in the 3 biggest games of the year, I mean, that doesn't happen by chance. I mean, that's not just luck. I mean, there's a lot of skill involved there. So,
well, like you've been saying, the difference was the Ohio State offensive line. They're bigger and stronger up front than Oregon, and I think that's evident.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it showed. So as far as Oregon next year goes, yeah, they're losing Mariota and whoever else they might be losing. But I don't expect them to have that much of a drop off. They've lost quarterbacks every single year.
Oh no, I mean, I'm not saying they're going to have like a drop off where they just don't compete. But what I'm saying is it'll be a lot of the same type of Oregon we've seen in the past, where during the regular season they're probably going to score a lot, but push comes to shove, playoff time, they're just not going to have the beef up front to compete.
Yeah. They'll win a lot of games next year, 60-35 and stuff, and stuff like that, and they may win the Pac-12. I don't know, but I'm done. Like, I thought it was going to be different this year. Now, the first half of the season, I didn't. I was anti-Oregon. But by the time the playoffs, I was on the Oregon train. And when Alabama lost to Ohio State and Oregon beat Florida State, I was all aboard the Oregon train. I fell for it, and I shouldn't have done that. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. That's a Lou's opinion. That's a psychological fact. And Oregon did exactly what they always do. So I'm not making that mistake again. The next time I'm wrong about Oregon, it'll be because I picked them to lose and they won. I won't pick them to win another big game. Won't happen.
Okay. I have one more question. I know it's y'all's show, but does Ohio State, does the quarterback now does everybody fumble and try to wonder where this guy came from?
Well, I don't think too many people are going to be wondering where this guy came from. I think the question more so is how many quarterbacks does Ohio State have that can come in and start right away? I mean, they're going to have a definite quarterback controversy come next season. I mean, I can definitely see one of them, maybe two. I don't know, maybe two of them transferring, because all three guys, Miller, Barrett, and Jones, they've all proven that they can start, in Division I, football. So whoever the starter is next year for Ohio State, you can bet your ass those other two quarterbacks are going to want to play. So I think that there's a good chance that at least one of them is going to be going somewhere else.
Yeah, they're not all three going to stay there. I would be willing to bet at least one of them is going to look to transfer out. But I had an argument with a Big Ten fan trying to make the argument that Urban Meyer was some sort of a great coach because he was able to win with a third-string quarterback. And you've probably been dealing with some of this too, Magnum. But these Big Ten fans, of course, are all full of themselves now. But, even going so far as to say that Urban Meyer is a better coach than Nick Saban and Nick Saban couldn't win with a third-string quarterback. Well, my argument against that is Nick Saban has been winning with third-string quarterbacks ever since he got to Alabama. Nick Saban has never had a first-string quarterback. Nick Saban has had nothing but average to below-average quarterbacks since he got to Alabama. He's had a bunch of Hudson Masons, people who don't turn the ball over and know how to hand it off. He's had 0 NFL quarterbacks there. Urban Meyer has had way better quarterbacks to work with than Nick Saban.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, yeah, Urban had...
Going back to Tim Tebow. Say what you want about Tebow, but hell, he broke every record on the books when he was at Florida. And Tim Tebow alone has started more NFL games than all of Nick Saban's quarterbacks combined. So the fact that Urban Meyer won with a third-string quarterback, that doesn't do anything to prove to me that he is somehow now a better coach than Nick Saban. One thing I will say, he now has 3 national titles. Saban has, 4? So Saban is 50.
Wait. He's got 3 with Alabama and 1 with LSU.
Yeah. And Urban Meyer has 2 with Florida and 1 with Ohio State. So, So Urban's got 3. Saban's got 4. But Saban is 60. Urban Meyer is 50. So now I'm not saying that it's not possible that one day down the road you'll be able to say that Urban Meyer is a better coach than Nick Saban, but I don't think you can say that right now. 10 years is a long time.
Both coaches have won with 2 different teams too. So
right.
Yeah, I mean, both. If anything, both of them are about equal right now. But the thing that Saban has is he does have 1 more national championship than Urban.
Right, yeah, and he's done it more consistently, I would say too, than Urban Meyer. But I mean, the thing with Urban Meyer, I will agree that right now he's a top 5 without a doubt right now. Nick Saban is a top coach of all time. So slow down on the Urban Meyer is better than Nick Saban routine. You know, congrats to Ohio State. They won a national title. The Big Ten overall is still way below the SEC, way below the Pac-12, and probably I'd put them below the Big 12. I'd put the Big Ten right now slightly ahead of the ACC for the worst conference in America. So slow down with the Urban Meyer is better than Nick Saban. Let's see how long, you know, he's never stayed at a school longer than 4 or 5 years. He's going into his 4th year next year at Ohio State. So give it a few years. Look, Ohio State fans will hate Urban Meyer at some point. He's not staying at Ohio State forever. It's not his MO. That's just not what he's going to do. So slow down with it. He's better than Nick Saban's speech. Don't want to hear it.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe, you know, like you said, somewhere down the line, you know, Urban may win 1 or 2 more national championships than Saban. Who knows? But, I mean, as we all know, sometimes, you know, some coaches never win one, and then once a coach wins one, you know, he never wins again. So, I mean, you just really don't know. And like you said, let's say, like at Florida, let's say stuff starts to go bad, he starts losing a lot of his good players. Will another excuse come up and he, you know, bail on the team? You know, good coaches, in my opinion, they stick through, you know, the good and hard times. You know, they don't bail when, you know, your team starts, you know, falling off.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. And Saban, you know, Saban's winning 11 games a year in the SEC. Meyer's winning 11 games a year in the Big Ten. So, you know, let's just slow down a little bit. Like I said, the one thing that Urban Meyer has working to his favor is his age. He's 10 years younger than Nick Saban, and only one title behind Nick Saban. So it's very possible he could catch Saban and pass him. And, you know, if that happens, then we can have this conversation again. And, you know, I'm sure I'll be singing a little bit of a different tune, but to say that he's better than Nick Saban right now, I can't agree with that.
Yeah.
And speaking of quarterbacks, let's talk about the SEC a little bit.
Well,
I was
kind of surprised. Ask you something real quick before we get into that. I was going to ask you something, and I was talking a little bit about this when the show started, and this is a topic that I definitely want to get your input in. The last several days, I've been dealing with a lot of freaking ass Tennessee fans. I know what you're thinking. You hear the word Tennessee, you're like, oh, here we go. Well, the thing that I'm going back and forth with Tennessee fans right now is they think that just because Butch Jones beat Iowa, they got a 7-6 record, 1 game above 500. They're all thinking that they're going to win the East next year. They think all their recruits coming in is better than what Georgia has coming in, and they think that Butch Jones is a better coach than Rick. And I was definitely I was like, yeah, I'm going to bring this up to Uncle Lou and see what he thinks.
Okay, I'm going to 2 separate statements about that. Number one, we talked about Tennessee a couple of weeks ago, and I came right out and said Tennessee is very, very close to having a really, really good team. I was a lot higher on Tennessee when we talked about Tennessee 2 weeks ago than you were. I mentioned they're having a great recruiting class. I mentioned they're getting Dobbs back. They have the running back back. Good part of I went through this whole thing where I talked good about Tennessee. I was a lot higher on them than you were. That's number one. Number two, whoever said that is out of their ever-loving mind. What has he? By the time Mark Richt had been at UGA, as long as Butch Jones has been at Tennessee, he had 2 SEC titles. Butch Jones has 1 scrub bowl win. That's it. They're still averaging 6 wins a year under Butch Jones. Mark Richt is averaging 10 wins a year. He's a better coach than Mark Richt. Whoever said that is clearly either out of their mind or they're such a Tennessee homer or they're blinded by their own fanhood. Nobody should be able to make that argument and keep a straight face. That's insane. Butch Jones is a better coach than Mark Richt? By what evidence? By what data are you using to support that claim? I mean, I don't get it. Even if you just look at Mark, I mean, you can compare this two different ways. You can say, okay, Butch Jones has been at Tennessee 3 years. Let's look at Coach Rick's first 3 years. Okay, Coach Rick's first 3 years were way better than Butch Jones' first 3 years. Okay, well, let's look at Butch Jones' 3 years and Mark Rick during that same 3-year period where Butch Jones has been at Tennessee. We're undefeated against Butch Jones. We're averaging twice as many wins a year during the last 3 years as they are. That's one of the craziest things I've ever heard. And I watch a lot of YouTube videos, so I hear crazy shit all the time. That ranks right up there with the most craziest thing I've ever heard.
Well, see, that's what I've been getting a lot, and then some of the other asinine shit they've been doing. Now, I understand that Tennessee is pulling in a better recruiting class than what they're accustomed to getting these last few years. But every last one of them are practically saying that Khalil McKenzie guy is better than Trent Thompson. When I bring up the fact that there's a reason why they rated Trent Thompson the number one player in the country, they did that for a reason. And the fact that Khalil McKenzie didn't even play his senior season, it's like, okay, he didn't play his senior season, maybe I think it was an injury or something. So he's going to be out of football, period, for a year coming in to the SEC, but yet they're claiming that he is like head and shoulders above Trent Thompson, and then they're still, we hear the same shit every year. Oh, Georgia's the choke artist of the SEC. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but hasn't Tennessee had 4 losing seasons in the last 5 years? I mean, a Tennessee fan trying to down Georgia right now, I'm sorry, that's just crazy.
I don't get it. I mean, okay, would you? Georgia's the new choke team. Okay, would you rather have won 10 games a year the last 3 years and played in decent bowl games all 3 years, or would you rather have been Tennessee, where you've averaged 6 wins a year and you've only made a bowl game once out of the last 3 years? And for Trent Thompson and this other, and what's his name, Khalil McKenzie, what does that have to do? Okay, you're talking about 2 kids who just got done playing high school football last month. How can you use the Trent Thompson versus Khalil McKenzie argument to try to bolster your claim that Butch Jones coach Khalil McKenzie in high school? Well, what are these people smoking? That's just ridiculous. Trent Thompson could show up at UGA and never play a down. Same thing with this Khalil McKenzie for Tennessee. You don't know what you're getting with these people. Now, these recruiting services are right a lot more than they're wrong. But, just because ESPN or 24/7 Sports or Rivals or whoever says Trent Thompson is number 1 and Khalil McKenzie is number 3, me and you both know that 4 years from now, that's not going to matter. So to try to say that Khalil McKenzie is going to be better than Trent Thompson, therefore Butch Jones is a better coach than Mark Richt, it's obvious that anyone making that argument is grasping for straws. They don't have any actual facts or data to support their claim. That's just insane. I don't even. You can't argue. Somebody that would make that argument, you can't even argue with somebody like that. You can't even have a debate with somebody like that. I mean, that's just ridiculous. That's just throwing a bunch of poop against the wall and seeing if any of it will stick. I mean, that's just insane.
Just
that's what I've been getting, man.
Just to make it, I'm understanding what y'all are saying, and you're totally correct about things. However, you do have to realize how bad Lane Kiffin did screw Tennessee, and their recruiting classes have suffered account of it.
Oh, believe me, I totally get it. And that's 2 weeks ago when we talked about Tennessee, I didn't have anything bad to say about Tennessee. And I don't have anything bad to say about Tennessee now, unless a Tennessee fan is going to try to look me in the eyes or type to me on Facebook or wherever that Butch Jones is better than Mark Richt. There's no data or argument to back that up anywhere. That's just insane. You can say whatever you want about Mark Richt and Georgia, that we haven't won it all. We haven't won the SEC in 10 years. We haven't done this. We haven't done that. All that stuff is true. What's also true is Butch Jones is averaging 6 wins a year and a bowl game every 3 years. We don't want that at UGA. If that's what's better than Coach Richt is, then I'll stay with Richt. No, thank you. That's just insane. It makes no sense.
Well, I mean, as I said, I've been getting a lot of that shit, and going back to what you said, Ray, about how bad Lane Kiffin screwed over Tennessee, I think everybody would agree that Lane Kiffin did screw over Tennessee, but at the same time, it's night and day where the programs are right now. Georgia, even on Georgia's like down years, we don't have 4 consecutive losing seasons. I mean, we have one like every now and then. Like we went 16 years without, and that one was in 2010. We went 6 and 7, but we don't have multiple years where we just completely fall off the map. Georgia, year in and year out, they're competing for the SEC East Divisional, championship and an SEC championship. They're in that mix every year. Tennessee is not. Tennessee goes through coaches like fucking snack cakes. I mean, coach.
It's been 10 years. It's been 10 years since Tennessee played a meaningful game in November. Well, I take that back. They considered their games in November this year meaningful because they were so thirsty for a bowl game. So to them, their November games were meaningful because they still needed wins in November. While teams like UGA are trying to win in November to position themselves for a playoff spot, teams like Tennessee are trying to win in November to get bowl eligible. I mean, give me a break.
Well, yeah, that's what I've been dealing with, man. So I definitely wanted to get your opinion on that. I mean, that's what I've been dealing with, and
that's ridiculous.
I've just got to the point where it's just like it's a lost cause trying to argue with those people.
Yeah. But something else quick here in the SEC I wanted to get your thoughts on today because this kind of surprised me a little. And I'm not sure if you heard this. I think this came out yesterday or maybe the day before. But Dak Prescott is coming back in Mississippi State. Had you heard that? And what do you think about that?
Yeah, I've read that article. There's been multiple articles. I think we're probably subscribed to the same shit that we get on our Facebook feeds. But I read that, and the thing that I get from that is, okay, offensively, they'll probably be okay, but they did, God damn it, I know they got a defensive coordinator in there, but again, it's going to be year one in a new system defensively. I know he's been there in the past, but then again, you got some players who wasn't with him before, so it's going to be like an adjustment period for those players that wasn't with him before. But I mean, in Mississippi State, I mean, they wasn't that great on offense to begin with. Dak Prescott gave them an opportunity to possibly win at the end of the game or whatever. They wasn't really great offensively, so I think you're probably going to see a lot of the same for Mississippi State next year as you did this year. I think Dak should have went to the NFL because I don't think he has anything to gain coming back.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, in Mississippi State and Ole Miss got more attention this year than they did the 20 previous years combined. I think he should have cashed in. Of course, you always have the injury thing to worry about. And when you look at the class of quarterbacks coming out of college this year, it's really 2 and then a huge drop-off. I mean, yeah, we all hate Jameis Winston, but let's face it, in the NFL, wins are all that matter. Somebody's going to draft him, and it's going to be really, really high, probably number 1 overall. So you got Winston and Mariota, but, I mean, who's the third quarterback off the board on the draft? I can't think of one off the top of my head. Surely Dak Prescott would be a top 4 or 5 coach. I mean, top 4 or 5 quarterback taken, I would think, unless there's quarterbacks from some of these smaller schools that I just haven't heard about yet. But I was completely shocked when I heard that.
Yeah, I was expecting him to go pro. So when he made the announcement and it came out that he was coming back, I mean, I was a little surprised by that, but I mean, it left me scratching my head because what does he have to gain? I mean, they're not really going to be any better than what they were this year. At most, they're going to they're going to fall off because, I mean, what are the chances that Mississippi State is going to repeat the success they had this year? I mean, Mississippi State has never had back-to-back 10-win seasons. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's true. So what are the chances that they're even going to be as good?
I mean, that's my thing. I don't get it. I mean, I admit I'm sounding real negative here, and I couldn't tell you whether Mississippi State has every one of their starters back next year, none of their starters. I couldn't tell you. I haven't looked into it. So, you know, who knows? Maybe he thinks they're lined up and primed to make some kind of huge run next year. Or, you know, maybe he heard from the NFL or from somebody's agents and things like that to get in these players' ears that he wasn't going to go very high for whatever reason this year. You know, so he, you know, decided to try to come back and improve his draft stock for next year. Who knows? But on the surface, it just seems strange because it seems like a weak quarterback class to me, especially in terms of quantity. Like I said, Winston and Mariota, and then, I mean, who's next? It was a terrible year for quarterbacks in the SEC. You know, there's not a quarterback in the SEC this year that's going to play on Sunday. That includes Bo Wallace. I can't see a team letting, you know, an NFL team letting him do all that much.
No, I guess the only reason I can see why he came back is like you just mentioned to, I guess, improve his draft stock because, you know, statistically, if he has a good season this coming up here, he could be a top 5 pick. I don't think there'll be too many quarterbacks that will, I mean, come to think of it, next season, let's think next season, who's going to be an NFL prospect? Okay, Kevin Hogan from Stanford, he announced he's coming back for his 5th year this year, so he's going to be a prospect. Okay, you're going to have Dak Prescott, so, and then I think after this year, Matty Mock will, you know, be gone, but I really don't see him succeeding in the NFL. So, I mean, if you think about it, a lot of these quarterbacks from next year, I think Dak may be the leader for, I guess, maybe the top quarterback taken in the draft. That's the only reason I could think he came back.
Now, what's the eligibility status of people like Bryce Petty from Baylor, Hundley from UCLA, and that guy from TCU? Are they freshmen, seniors? I don't have any clue. Do you?
I don't know about the TCU. No, Alex, I don't know too much about it, but Brett Hundley, I do think is gone. So, but see, the thing about Brett Hundley is
he fell off the face of the earth this year. UCLA had a really bad year.
I mean, yeah, even at UCLA, I mean, I don't think he was spectacular.
We had a lot of hype coming into the season, and I don't know. I mean, does he have like a really strong arm? I mean, I don't know. I know he was a preseason Heisman favorite to some people, and almost everybody had him at least as a candidate. Same with Bryce Petty from Baylor, which, I mean, let's face it, Baylor still scored 50, 60 points a game. But I don't know what's going on with those guys. I don't know if they're in the draft this year or next year.
I would put Bryce Petty above Brett Hundley, no question about that. I think Bryce Petty would succeed in the NFL a lot more so than Brett Hundley. I don't think Brett Hundley's an NFL quarterback. I really don't.
I hope that guy from TCU is going to the NFL because, good God, TCU, man, they might have been the best team. I mean, I'm not going to say that because it's not fair to Ohio State. I mean, we finally get a 4-team playoff to supposedly determine a team champion, so I'm not going to diss Ohio State that way. But, man, they sure did look good.
Well, I mean, me and Ray talked about that toward the beginning of the show, and like I said, I may be one of the odd ones out because, in my personal opinion, if any team got screwed out of the playoffs, it was Baylor because they beat TCU in the head-to-head matchup. Both teams had one loss. So, in my opinion, go with the tiebreaker. Okay, who beat who in the head-to-head matchup? Well, Baylor beat TCU. So, I mean, I also stated that TCU, no doubt in my mind, that they could have competed with the teams there in the playoff, but I also think Baylor could have as well. And I just think Baylor was the one team that should have been there quicker than TCU.
I completely agree, but it's just like us saying it's like the Georgia-Missouri situation. You know, anybody you ask will pretty much tell you TCU is better than Baylor, but it doesn't matter. You know, Baylor beat them heads up, so that's that. Same thing with Georgia and Missouri this year. Anybody in their right mind is going to tell you Georgia's the better team, but Georgia didn't win the East, so we didn't get to go to Atlanta. Same situation there. All this talk about expanding the playoffs, I mean, I'm not saying it shouldn't ever happen or that it won't ever happen, but it just feels like everyone's jumping the gun after 1 year of a 14 playoff. To me, I like the excitement. I mean, like during the BCS, I looked forward to knowing who was going to be ranked third in that last BCS poll. And maybe that's just because it's in my nature to kick people when they're down. I don't know. And to me now it's the same thing. Like, the Big 12 is the butt of all my jokes now because you got left out of a 14 playoff. And I don't want to lose that. You know, it brings excitement. It's something to talk about. You know, winning your conference doesn't guarantee you to get in if there's only 4 teams. Like I said, I'm sure one day it'll go to 6 or 8, but I wouldn't mind doing sort of like what we did with the BCS and keeping 4 teams for 10, 12 years, something like that, and then expanding. Now, having said all that, if they came out tomorrow and said, okay, we're expanding to 8 teams, I'd be okay with that too. I'm not against 8 teams. I just, you know, it wouldn't bother me to enjoy the 4-team playoff for a few years before everybody starts bashing it. Mm-mm.
Yeah, I mean, well, going back to what you said, it was kind of the same thing as the Georgia-Missouri game. I think it's a bit different because, like I said, I think TCU and Baylor both could have competed, you know, in the playoffs. But at no time do I think that Missouri could compete in that 14 playoff. I mean, that to me, it's not the same because Baylor and TCU both had 1 loss. Both of those people were vying for that playoff spot, and both of them were left out. I mean, Missouri was never even in the running really for the playoffs. So to me, it's a little different.
One of the big reasons that TCU and Baylor both got left out is because the Big 12 screwed itself. The Big 12 is mostly to blame for the Big 12 being left out. All during the preseason and the off-season, they were on every radio show, every press conference, everything, telling anyone who would listen, we're the only conference that does it the right way. We have 10 teams. Every team plays every other team. So at the end of the season, we'll have 1 true champion. No other conference can say that, blah, blah, blah. Then TCU and Baylor go out in great years. TCU looks like a powerhouse, but they lose to Baylor. Baylor also has 1 loss. So you look at it and you say, okay, well, TCU and Baylor have the same record, but Baylor beat TCU, so Baylor is the 12 champion. Well, the Big 12 comes out and says, no, we're not doing that. We're going to have co-champions. We're not picking between TCU and Baylor. Look, head-to-head is the oldest tiebreaker known to man. When cavemen invented paper, rock, scissors, if there was a tie, head-to-head, that's been the tiebreaker since forever. So the Big 12 came out in the middle of the year because they saw what was happening. Everybody was ranking TCU higher because people thought TCU was the better team, even though they lost to Baylor. So the Big 12 looked at it and said, well, what's going to happen if we give the Big 12 title to Baylor, but TCU is ranked higher? Well, they're going to leave us out of the playoffs. So instead of doing that, maybe we ought to just do this co-champion thing and let the polls decide who they think is better between the two. And they screwed themselves because it made them look hypocritical, going around preaching to every other